Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men said, screw it, let's make an omelet. So what kind of omelet do you think all the king's men ended up making? They could have made any number of kind of omelets. There's so many different types of omelets. But today, we're only going to be focusing on 3. How to make a French omelet, how to make an Italian omelet, and how to make an American omelet. Because I think those are probably the 3 top omelets that everybody thinks about immediately when they think of omelet for the most part. Although, I have to say, the omurice omelet has gained a lot of popularity, and I think it's really kind of cool. And there's a lot of videos out there. You can check that out if you've not heard of it before. Suffice it to say, we're just going to be doing those 3 mainstream, if you will, omelets: the Italian, the French, and the American. And wow, look at all the stuff we're going to put in it. So, dare I say it, let's get cracking. So we're going to be doing a frittata. We're going to be doing it the traditional way. So I have a 10-inch non-stick skillet. Next, the eggs. Basically use about 2 per person. Now typically when you do an American omelet, right, or a French omelet, you use 3 eggs. You know, you've heard of the 3-egg omelet, but when you're doing a frittata, you want to use 2 eggs. So I'm going to start with 8 eggs, and I'm using my egg to break the egg. Or you can do the way you're supposed to on the counter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, some people say, put in 1 egg for the pan. More the merrier, so 9. Now, a little bit of salt. And some people say, never salt your eggs, please. I mean, if you really don't believe it, don't do it. But salting your eggs after the fact is like, I don't know, salting your steak after the fact. You don't really want to do that, as far as I'm concerned. So salt, we're using kosher. Pepper, as much as you would like. And just show those yolks who's the boss by smashing them around, breaking them up a little bit first. And then with a whisk, beat them up. You don't want those little strands of white in there. You know what I'm talking about? You want it to be as homogeneous as possible. The idea is not to whisk air into it necessarily, but you definitely want the yolks and the whites to mingle. That's about it, okay? So now, Parmigiano Reggiano, we put some in the egg, but we don't put a ton, okay? Because we're not making quiche, but we are gonna put a little bit of cheese in there, give it some nice flavor. Some people will now leave it that way, which is perfectly fine. And some people will actually add some heavy cream to it. So the egg is ready to go. This is your base for your tortilla, if you're doing a Spanish one without the cream, or for a Italian frittata. Now, at this point, the rest of it's done on the stove. There's a couple of things you want to keep in mind when you're doing eggs. Don't keep your heat so hot that you got to do everything really, really fast, right? Don't keep your heat so low that it takes way too long. You want something sort of in the middle, because if it starts to move along too fast, then the eggs start to cook too fast, and then they brown too fast, and then when you're done, you're like, this didn't come out very well. So just take your time with it. I have a gas flame, and I'm doing it sort of at a moderately high heat. The other thing is, when you're doing a frittata, try to make sure that everything is cut relatively small. You don't want anything really fine dice, but you don't want anything that's so big that it's unwieldy and you can't stir it. And then when you go to slice it, pieces of stuff fall out and pull out and all that type of stuff. You want a nice clean slice. Another tip for when you're doing a frittata, make sure that your pan is sufficiently hot before you start. Okay? You don't want it stupid hot like when you're doing mushrooms, but you definitely need it warmed up enough. Since we're doing an Italian frittata, we're starting with olive oil. So I'm going to start with the meat. If you are using a meat, start with the meat. You want to render out some of that fat and that flavor. And The goal here isn't to get anything crispy. You just want to warm things through, extract some of the flavor. See, you can see that the oil is changing color and it's starting to smell now, right? This is if you're doing it for breakfast, this is the point where people start waking up. If you're the only one in the kitchen, and they're like, oh, that smells good. Once it gets to sort of that point, you got a little bit of browning. I'm going to add some onion, and again, you just sort of make it up. Typically, when I add onion and peppers to something, I add them at the same time because they basically have the same cook time. Who wants to do a whole episode on tossing? I know my daughter's been after me lately. She's like, Dad, you really got to teach me how to toss. I did pre-saute some potatoes. For those of you interested in the Spanish tortilla de patate, that does not have that in it. It's usually just potatoes and onions, and then as we continue, that would be the classic Spanish tortilla. But it always has like potatoes in it. But I pre-cook these to save time. Now that's sort of monochromatic. So we're gonna put a little bit of maybe some red and green in there. No matter what you put in there, just make sure you don't overload. If you put too much, that's even worse because basically you are affecting the structure of the final dish. There's not enough egg to hold everything together if you put too much stuff in there, and then it just sort of falls apart in this, like, I don't know. It kind of wants to be a frittata, but it's sort of a scramble, but it's sort of held together, but not really, and you kind of slice it. And can you tell this has happened to me before? Okay, that's all nice and warm through. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw some green in there because I think it needs a little bit of green. So this is just like some baby spinach and baby beet tops, which I think are really cool. I think I like them because they have a little red strip there. Anyway, throw those in there, and those are just going to wilt. And then I'm going to put in a little bit of red. Those tomatoes that we have. I'm not going to put all of them in there. Don't overload it with tomato because there's a lot of water. My aunt used to make these for dinner. She'd make it. She's, I'm making a frittata. You want to come over? I'm like, yeah. If you want, you can put some garlic. I'm going to put a little bit in, and I'm putting it in towards the end. Isn't that interesting? I didn't put it in at the beginning. I don't want the garlic to be really intense. I want it to be sort of light and in the background. So that's why I didn't put it in first. I didn't want to brown it. I'm putting it in towards the end, and it's nicely perfumed right now. Even though we put Parmesan, Parmigiano, because there's a difference, in the eggs, we still want to salt and pepper as you go, right? One of the tricks that chefs do, they salt and pepper at each stage. And then you say, why is it I made the same thing at home and it didn't taste the same? This is the most important point. When you add in the eggs, add in your eggs and start bringing the outside in. You can give it a little shake here and there and then scrape. Shaking and scraping. What you're looking for is scrambled eggs, if you will, that are just a little moist on top. At this point, you would put it into a 350 degree, 375 degree oven, somewhere in there, and you would bake it until it's just firm. You would also, if you wanted to add goat cheese or something that didn't really need a lot of cooking, you would put that on top. You can actually, in fact, maybe I will, put some Parmesan on top. Here's two different ways of finishing a frittata, right? Traditionally, at this point, I would go ahead and I put it in the oven, 350 degrees until it's done. A second way to do it would be in the Spanish tortilla style, if you don't want to bother with warming up your oven and all that other stuff, and you would flip it, right, with a plate. I'm waiting for the bottom to brown, and you can see it's still sort of soft. At this point, I got to get the rest of brunch ready.
Later.
Okay, we're ready to take this guy out of the oven. Doesn't that look pretty? Look at that. Look at that. And what I want you to see is, come in here, come here, come here, come here. See how my finger, that's hot, springs back, just like that. And there's no more liquid egg. There's some browning around the sides, right? That's what you're looking for. If you cook that any longer, it's gonna dry out. So now, traditionally, you would serve it just like that. You'd cut it and you'd serve slices. But since I was also talking about the Spanish tortilla, the other way that you can serve it is flipping it. Or if I was going to finish this on the stove instead of in the oven, you would flip it that way to finish the second side, this side. So, ooh, that is your Italian frittata or your Spanish tortilla. It can be this brown, it can be less brown, it can be very light brown, but you gotta have some brown, otherwise it's really not what it's supposed to be. So there is one omelet, probably the simplest, and maybe even the most interesting, I don't know. But we got 2 more to go, let's do it! We're not gonna be doing a big one like we did already with the frittata, we're gonna be doing an individual one, and that is a 3-egg omelet. When you are doing an omelet, it's important to keep in mind the ratio of how many eggs to size pan, okay? What I mean is, if you have 2 eggs and you're using a 10-inch pan, you're basically gonna get an egg crepe. If you've got 4 eggs and you're using, you know, a pan even smaller than this, you're gonna end up having an egg cake. So depending on how many eggs you're using and the size of your pan, you want to keep that ratio just right. So 3 large or extra large eggs do really well in an 8-inch pan. So I've got 3 eggs, I've got some salt, I got some pepper, break those yolks. Now you can use olive oil. My grandfather and my mom actually, whenever they made scrambled eggs or made a frittata or an omelet or this type of omelet or whatever, they'd always use olive oil because they're Italian. They really like the olive oil. And that's it actually gives a very nice flavor, even to just scrambled eggs and that good extra virgin olive oil. Totally different from butter. Butter, you get that richness and whatnot. Or you can combine the two if you want. My other grandmother used to do that quite a bit because she was from northern Italy and she would combine butter and olive oil pretty much all the time. Then I had a grandfather who would, I'm serious, he would use anywhere between a half a cube and a whole cube of butter for 1 egg. Right. And then he sopped it all up with bread. So what we're going to do with this one is I think we're going to just stick to the classic butter. And I'm using about a tablespoon. And you want to heat your pan enough, but you don't want to superheat it because otherwise the butter is going to immediately turn brown. And we don't want that. Some ingredients that you're going to put in these omelets, these types of omelets, you want to pre-cook. You would either, like if you're going to do a Denver omelet, you would put the bell pepper in and everything in here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the mushroom inside of the omelet. And in order to do that, it has to be pre-cooked. You don't want to put raw mushrooms in there, otherwise you got raw mushrooms in there. And for this one, you start bringing everything towards the center. And I'm adjusting the heat here by taking it on and off. And what you're wanting is big curds. See, these are referred to as curds. And as they start to quote unquote coagulate or dry up, however you want to say it, you kind of tilt the pan so that the egg hits the pan. So at this point, I'm going to add some mushroom and don't overfill, and then put your cheese in there. Check it to see that it's not sticking. Very important, because if it sticks, you got to scramble. You can flip it just like this if you want, but sometimes it breaks. So what I do to sort of help mitigate that is I lift the pan up just a bit, and as I'm bringing the pan down, I use gravity to flip. So I go. Now see this one here, it broke just a little bit because it was a little too thin there, but that's okay, because when you serve it, make sure the omelet is on the side of the pan furthest from the handle, because then you pick up the pan this way, not this way, place it on the plate just like this, and flop. Okay, here we go. It's time. We've worked our way up to the classic French omelet. 3 eggs. I've already got them beaten. Show them who's boss. And of course, butter. One of the, or I should say 2 of the hallmarks of a classic French omelet is no color, or very little if you really want to push it, but no color at all, no brown, and cigar shape, right? I should say there's 3. And then the inside is slightly more underdone than the outside. So when you cut it in half, you see like a slightly more cooked egg on the outside and then a creamy center. And when you poke it, it doesn't spring. It's kind of jiggly. We're gonna do this one on low heat. Unlike the American omelet, which we're going for big curds, we want very small curds. In fact, we don't even really want to see the curds. So you'll see on this omelet, I actually take the eggs off the heat quite a bit. Because as I start to see curds forming, I take it off and I blend them back in with the liquid egg, okay? What you want with a French omelet is that creamy center. You see that? It's still a little creamy there. And at this point, if you're going to add something as a filling, I should have added the chives to the eggs itself, but it's okay. We'll go ahead and put some cheese in there. Again, don't overload it. And then start by taking this side, okay, and rolling it towards the end away from you. Give it a hit there, right? This side of the omelet pops up, and then fold it over like this. And then, just like the American omelet, you grab it this way, bring the plate over, and it's almost like a half moon. Now, some people will stop at that point. They'll serve it just like that. Other people will take like a paper towel or a packaged clean kitchen towel, put it on top, and then they'll kind of push it together like that. And they'll make a cylinder, more of a cylinder. But I sort of like this more classic shape. But as you can see, this one has no color whatsoever. It's perfectly yellow, or blonde, as they would say. And if I do this, see that, how it gives? Just a little bit. That is your classic French omelet. So let's go look at these 3 and do a little comparison, shall we? And there we have it. 4, actually. You got a bonus omelet. Why don't we try these? And I don't know, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which one should I start with? Let's start with the frittata, or the tortilla. Pretty much the same thing. Actually, before I do that, this is what I did. I cut it in half and flip one side. So that way you can see what it would look like if you served it bottom up, or if you served it right side up, right? So it obviously looks completely different. But anyway, it tastes the same. I just decorate it with a little bit of tomato, a little bit of sour cream or creme fraiche, and some basil, just to give it a little pop of color. But when I cut it, I want to show you, see that? You can see all the ingredients in there, because they're all chopped up small enough, right? Nothing's falling out. You got a nice clean cut, just like that. And it's nice and soft, not too firm, because we put the cream in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna, this is good hot, this is good warm, this is good room temperature, not cold. So I'm just gonna pick it up. Yeah, that's good. You can taste everything going on in there. And it's not too dense, it's not springy, not quite a quiche, right? But it's sort of in between It's really got fantastic flavor. I think I might have one more. Now, we'll go to the American omelet. I'm just gonna cut it in half. So you can see inside, see? You have egg on top, you got your filling, and egg on the bottom. And this one, right, has a little bit of brown on there. Actually, I'll probably use a fork. Ha, good idea, Dave. And it's very good. And it's tender, it's not overcooked. Because if it was overcooked, it'd be kind of dry and kind of rubbery. And now, the pièce de résistance, you have to cut this one in half. And there you go. You got slightly more cooked egg on the outside and nice creamy egg and whatever filling in the middle. So I'm gonna cut a little strip of that one and try this one. See? Not pretty, you have to admit, it's kind of pretty. Okay. I love them all, but I don't know what it is. I grew up with this one, but there's just something about that one. It all depends on your mood and the time of day. These are great for breakfast, they're great for brunch, and they're great for dinner. So please go ahead and like, because I like you, and share, and ring the little bell so you get notified for the next episode. And send me your comments, post them. I'd love to know what you have to say. Enjoy. Damn, that's good.